Yes, correct.
How is the relationship between the Knicks and Carmelo Anthony like right now?
Not good. Not good. It's interesting because as a reporter, I listened to what Phil Jackson said in some of the press conferences. I was, in one of the press conferences, and I've heard everything he had to say about Carmelo. And I just, from a guy who was looking for a good story to tell, I appreciate, his honesty in saying like we think it's best for Carmelo to move on. But from the perspective of the team player relationship and from the perspective of the team's relationship with potential free agents, it's the wrong thing to say. Like you handle that stuff privately, and publicly you say, hey, we're not going to comment on it, because when you bring that out into the open, what happens is you're creating this perception that you don't treat your own players well, you don't treat your own stars well, and that filters throughout the league. And then let's say you're a free agent and what happened between Phil and Carmelo this year, and let's say you're also talking to, let's just say, San Antonio or whatever other organization is, and that organization doesn't publicly discuss wanting to trade its star players, and let's say San Antonio's offering you 5.6 million and the Knicks are offering you 5.8 million. Maybe you're going to say, hey, I'm going to sacrifice that $200,000 because I don't want to deal with potentially getting thrown under the bus by the team president. I'm just going to go to San Antonio because I think that I won't have to face that kind of a situation with their team president. So I think ultimately Phil's honesty, which again, as a reporter, I appreciate, probably hurts him when it comes to attracting free agents, and just the relationship in general between Carmelo and the Knicks. I think a lot of the trust there has been eroded because of how things have played out this season. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I don't think that it's going to end well. Unless somehow Phil and Carmelo get together, get in a room, kind of hash out their differences. Which I don't think will happen. I think ultimately it will either be Carmelo decides, hey, you know what, I'm okay with moving on. I'm going to accept a trade to wherever he would accept a trade to, or he stays here and then management continues to try to make it uncomfortable for him and ultimately try to force him to waive that no trade and to leave. So I think it's not going to be a good situation unless they get together and figure it out, which I think is unlikely at this point. Yes. What's your name?
Aaron.
Aaron. What's up?
What motivated you to be the person you are to this day? Like, what pushed you?
That's a great question, man. A lot of different motivations, I think. I think I just had a passion for the field of journalism, and it's a competitive industry, man, and I've been doing it for I think 12 years now. Had my ups and downs, like had my challenges, and I think what really led me to stick with it is just having a passion for the job, and that's part of it. And now the other part, I have a different motivation now because I just started a family, have a wife and a young daughter, so really now that's all the motivation I need. I think probably before this it was more about wanting to excel because I have a kind of a competitive nature when it comes to this stuff, but now that's still part of it, but it's more just about my family. So that's a good question. Yes, what's your name?
Adrian.
Adrian.
Yeah, I know you said you've been covering the Knicks for a while. I just wanted to know, like, over the years, one of the more memorable sound bites you had, whether it's interviewing a player, interviewing a coach, as far as maybe inflammatory comments, anything that stuck out to you, like, wow, this is a great interview, or this is something that I won't forget. It's a memorable sound bite.
That's a great question. Oh man, there's been so many because this team is so crazy. I think in general, and I can't think of a single quote that stands out, but just covering J.R. Schmidt, man, like, there was always something going on with him, and I think he gets publicly probably gets a bad rap because maybe people on the outside, I don't know what they see. Maybe they see him being kind of aloof. They see, I don't know, who knows, the tattoos, whatever they see, and they assume he's a bad guy. But that hasn't been my experience at all. Just a great guy who has a good heart and, maybe made some poor decisions over the course of the years, which, you know, we've all made mistakes. He just happens to be making them in the public eye. But I think really a dedicated family guy and a very nice person. But it just seemed like every other month there was something going on with him with the Knicks. And I'm trying to think of something that's appropriate for this audience because so much of it was not. The time where he untied, I think it was Dwight Howard's shoelaces, and then
And Sean Marion.
yeah, and it was shown. He did it twice though. He got warned about it, and then he did it again like the next day. And we were talking to him about it, and his explanation was just like, "Hey man, like I don't know what happened." And he got fined like I don't remember $50,000 or something crazy like that. But just as a reporter, I appreciate guys like that who really are not afraid to show their personality, regardless of what the implications may be. I miss JR in New York. I'll say that.
Me too.
Yes.
So, if you didn't choose this job, what job would you have chose?
Really good question. You know, it's funny. This is a tough industry to be in right now because of the economics of it, and so I think about that sometimes. I think if I was going back in time, maybe I would have studied the law and been a lawyer, possibly. So I think about that. A lot of my friends in college ended up working in finance, and I don't know if you guys know anything about that industry, but those guys make a lot of money. So I think about that sometimes. But really, I just have such a affinity for this job. I can't see myself really doing anything else. But maybe if I went back in time and said, all right, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do something else, maybe a lawyer, maybe. Yes.
Are you in control of your location? Like, do you have the free will to like go publish another team, or are you held to the Knicks?
So I can write about other teams. I just have to run it by my bosses, our editors. We have at ESPN, I think we have 11 guys who are covering teams specifically, like myself, covering teams, you know, like the Cavs, the Bulls, the Lakers, the bigger teams. So I probably couldn't, if I wanted to, just write about one of those other teams. I would have to run it by those guys. But in general, yeah, I have the freedom to write what I want to a certain degree. And I can work from, you know, right now I could work from wherever I want because there's no event to cover. In a few days, I'm going to head down to Orlando because the Knicks are doing their summer league down in Orlando. So we'll get to see Frank Ntilikina. We'll get to see Dennis Smith. They're actually going to play against each other in summer league on July 1st, so I'm looking forward to that one. But by and large, I do have a lot of freedom to do what I want to do, which is nice. Yes, Coach.
So, going back to the Carmelo and Phil Jackson thing.
Yeah.
In the years that Phil Jackson has been the president of the Knicks, do you feel like the implementation of the triangle and the coaches' choices have set the Knicks up for success for the long run? Or do you feel like Phil Jackson has actually stymied the progress of the organization being as politically correct as possible?
Yeah, I think that's there's so many different factors that in play there. I think you just look at the record and the fact that they won 54 games in 2012, 2013, and then 37 games in 13-14. You know, it seems like they were on the downslide. So from that perspective, to me, it would have made sense just to blow it up and rebuild. But what Phil did was he kind of went halfway. And he didn't commit all the way to rebuilding, and I don't think he committed all the way to building a winner at that time because he re-signed Carmelo. And then once he realized that team was not going to be as successful as he thought it was going to be, he blew it up. They won 17 games that year. Drafted Kristaps Porzingis, seemed to be in pretty good shape. But then last summer, it seemed like they were on the path of building long-term, building around Porzingis. And then last summer, it seemed like he changed course again, and he wanted to win right now, win right away. So they signed D. Rose, got Joakim Noah, Courtney Lee, Brandon Jennings, and it didn't work out again. So now they're in the same position where what do they do? Do they go full rebuild? Do they go young? Do they start over? Or does he try to put together a team that can compete for a playoff spot? And I don't know if Phil has really committed one way or the other to doing that. And that's, to me, the wrong way to team build. You have to be all in on one direction or the other. It seems like he's caught in the middle. As far as the triangle goes, like, you guys know the game. You coaches know it better than I do, so you could probably speak with more authority about how the triangle fits into today's NBA. Just talking to players, though, they talk about how difficult it is to learn and how much it stymies that guard position that, you know, we talked about earlier. So much is based on the high pick and roll now. So much is created off of that. And with the two guard front, it's just different. I mean, there's still pick and roll in the triangle, but there's not as much high pick and roll as you see in other NBA offenses. So I don't know if it fits well in today's NBA. I know there's been a lot of resistance to it from the Knicks over the past few years. I think what Phil's trying to do now is get new guys in there who don't have enough, gravitas or enough experience to resist, where they're just young guys and they have to really buy into the system and then see what happens once everyone's bought in.
Well, last two questions.
Yes, yeah.
Do you think there's any certain way that players are supposed to handle the media? And is there anything they're restricted from talking about?
That's a great question. One thing that came up recently, players are not allowed to publicly talk about wanting to be traded because they'll get fined. And that came up because Phil Jackson, as an executive, mentioned that he thought Carmelo was better off playing elsewhere. So the Players Association said, hey, if players can't say we want to be traded, if we can't say that publicly, why should executives be able to say that? So that's one thing that they're restricted in saying. I think that the guys who handle the media the best make themselves available because they understand we just have a job to do. And when they speak to the media, they speak honestly to a degree. They say what's on their mind, but I think they also do a good job of filtering it, trying to keep things positive, crediting their teammates and their coaches and crediting the group rather than crediting themselves and putting blame